am Gratiela Baias, and I have today the honor to have here Dr. Thomas Lodi. Dr. Thomas Lodi is the pioneer in integrative medicine, and he's the founder of Healing Center in Arizona. He is a medical doctor specialized in internal medicine, in urgent care, in homeopathy, and also he's a clinical psychologist. So thank you very much, Dr. Lodi, for being here. You are now at the end of a week, full week of training in integrative medicine for Romanian physicians and nursing staff. And I would like, if you want to start, to tell a few words about your very interesting career path and to the why did you choose this specialty, integrative medicine, integrative oncology more precisely?
Well, I never wanted to be a doctor. I had studied, when I was young, I studied on my own about nutrition, and I knew that doctors didn't really know anything about nutrition. They didn't help the people, so I didn't want to be part of it. So I went, my path was really more spiritual. I traveled around the world and lived in India and did things like that, and studied Eastern religions, Eastern philosophy. I went back to the United States and studied and practiced clinical psychology for a while, and then I came to the realization that I didn't understand pathology. I didn't understand the effect a disease would have on somebody's behavior, and I didn't understand the medicines they were taking. So I went to medical school just so I could round out my education and knowledge. So I went to medical school for that reason, and that's why when I came through it, my focus was not just the body, it was the spiritual part and the psychological part, because I already knew that how important they were. And so, but I practiced, I was trained at a standard conventional medical school and residency program in New York, and so I learned how to do what all doctors do, and so I worked in ICUs and CCUs, surgical intensive care units. I worked in emergency rooms, and I liked that because we could either help the person or not, and it was easy, but we could help people, and that's where I think the conventional medicine really works. It really works in acute care and urgent care and intensive care. If you need a surgery, if you're having a heart attack, things like that. If you're having a problem with the baby coming out, something like that, it's really good. But I saw real clearly that the medical profession had no tools to help people with chronic conditions. And so after 10 years of that, I quit and I went around the world and studied different types of healing disciplines. And then I finally settled in New York again and opened up a center, and that's it. I've been doing that for about 18, 20 years now, doing integrative oncology. And the reason I chose oncology is because oncology is the people, first of all, we're in a worldwide pandemic. 1 out of 3, 4 people alive will get cancer. I mean, that's a pretty scary thought. And so there's a great need for this, number one. And I also realized that the way the conventional approach to helping people with cancer doesn't work. Only most people actually die from the treatments. And we know this is well established in the literature. Most people getting chemo and radiation will die from malnutrition because they can't eat anymore, or they die from overwhelming infection. Because they get sepsis because their immune system has been damaged. So this is well established, and that's why even in conventional oncology right now, all the research is looking for ways of developing like targeted therapies and therapies that are not going to, like, other than chemotherapy. They're looking for targeted therapies, and so that's really, so, you know, anyway, that's a promise. It's better than conventional chemo and radiation. So that, and also the other thing is that with cancer, people are more willing to make changes in their life, which is what's necessary. People who don't have cancer are always trying to negotiate. You know, can I just do a little bit of this? Can I just, and they're always, but with cancer, people are usually so devastated that they're willing. And it's that state of mind, that sense of, that surrender, that willingness, all that stuff is really part of the healing process. And so, you know, that's kind of why I chose this field. And then finally, because people with cancer have every condition. They don't only, you know, they usually have problems with their hormones, they have problems with diabetes, or they have high blood pressure, or, you know, they've had other things. Although, there are a lot of people who are pretty good, except for the cancer. But anyway, it gives you an opportunity as a doctor to work with everything, you know, so it keeps you sharp and all that.
Yeah.
I like it.
And what is, in your opinion, cancer?
Well, my opinion comes from basically from data, and so I think it's pretty much established nowadays as fact that cancer is a failure of the cell to be able to use oxygen and glucose to make energy. It's called oxidative phosphorylation, but basically it's a failure in cellular respiration. And this was first announced and discovered in 1931 when Dr. Otto Warburg was given the Nobel Prize for his discovery that cancer is a defect in this. And then what's odd is that that was sort of forgotten about, and the conventional approach went into another direction where they poison and go to war against the person, against the cancer. They bomb it, everything. But now, in the last, I'd say 15, 20 years, science is starting to come around. All the hard science being done in universities, they're starting to realize, they're starting to sort of rediscover the fact that the defect that we're talking about that causes cancer is an organelle in the cell called the mitochondria, and the mitochondria are where the oxygen and glucose come in. If those get damaged, then the cell, to stay alive, starts to make energy through a process known as fermentation. And fermentation then changes, the cell needs to change its enzyme systems to accommodate fermentation, and those changes that it makes are what we call cancer. So that's why when the doctor, the pathologist, looks under the microscope, he sees this is bigger, that's bigger, and all those changes in the cell, the structure of the cell, are a consequence of the cell's need to function differently. So anyway, those genes that are turned on to change, to modify the metabolism, are called oncogenes. And that's what, you know, the oncologists have found. Oh, you have this so they look at your genetics and they say, aha, you have this, and this. But the reason you have this genetic expression is because it's supporting chronic fermentation. This is very important. If you know this, then of course you use therapies that are going to work at that level, at helping the mitochondria come alive, and stuff like that. So instead of going to war against the cancer and bombing it, and this is why I think we have such a great success.
Can you tell us about this very successful therapy that you are using?
IPT.
IPT, yeah.
IPT is one of the therapies that we use to target the cancer, because the idea is, you know, if you know, the standard approach is you give chemotherapy, and the problem is that the chemotherapy is very good at killing cells, but it's not specific, so it kills all the cells. So yeah, the tumor shrinks, but so does your immune system shrink, everything. And then people even get what's called chemo brain. They get forgetful, they get slow, they lose their hair because it's getting the whole body. So if you can figure out a way to just kill the cancer cell, and that's what IPT is. IPT is insulin potentiated low dose chemo, and it was first discovered in 1936. And the reason it works is very simple, what we just talked about. Because cancer is fermenting, it now needs 19 times more sugar just to make the same energy that a normal cell would. So that's why cancer loves sugar. That's why we do PET scans. When we do a PET scan, we inject fluorodeoxyglucose, which is a radioactive glucose. We wait an hour, scan the person, and wherever we see the glucose being picked up quickly, then we say, aha, there's cancer, there's cancer, there's cancer. So we know this, our technology knows it, but we don't use this knowledge for treatment, we just use it for diagnosis, which is crazy.
Why do you think is this?
I think because most of the money being spent to research is coming from pharmaceutical companies. And so that's what they do, they look for chemotherapy. I don't really understand it, it doesn't make sense to me, because if I were a pharmaceutical company and I would say, well, let's figure out a way to stimulate mitochondria and starve the cancer cells, and then we would have the most success, so we would have the most business. But so I don't know, so I really don't understand why they don't do it, but they don't. But anyway, so IPT is, so one of the ways that a cancer cell changes and is different from a healthy cell is that because it needs more sugar, it has more insulin receptors, because we all know that insulin opens the door to let the glucose in, and diabetics have a problem with that. So the cancer cell has more receptors to catch insulin, which means if you go to sleep tonight, you wake up in the morning, you're hungry, you eat something sweet, you eat a piece of cake, or you eat a banana, or you eat anything sweet, or you put 3 or 4 teaspoons of coffee, sugar in your coffee, right, or a donut. Now your blood sugar goes up, your pancreas makes insulin, the cancer cells grab that insulin first, and they eat. So the cancer cells eat first. So it's a survival mechanism for cancer cells. So we kind of use that as a Trojan horse. The person comes in hungry, you give them a little bit of insulin, not a lot, a little bit. The cancer cells grab it first, and they're wide open, wanting to eat, and then you can give a 10% dose of chemo, and it goes right there. And so you don't have to lose your hair, you don't have to get really sick. So it's a much more gentle, kind, and rational way to do it. So that's one of the approaches. All the other approaches are not poisons. We don't use chemo, we use different kinds of therapies that harm cancer, but are good for healthy cells.
Which is the most successful from the therapies you are using?
Well, it's there. You can't really say which is the most successful, because really it's the combination of using many therapies that works the best. Because there are centers around the world who do pretty much focus on vitamin C, other ones focus on IPT, other ones focus on mistletoe, or some just hypothermia. So there are centers that do just one thing, but the problem is that cancer is very clever and will find a way to become resistant. I mean, think about it. You're giving high doses of chemotherapy. Now this drug is so poisonous that you lose your hair, your bone marrow, you get so sick. But the cancer cell is able to become resistant. That's pretty powerful. So if it can become resistant to a major poison, it can become resistant to a lot of things. So if you do just 1 or 2 things, the cancer is going to find a way around it. So that's why we do several things that don't harm, and that way the cancer cell is overwhelmed, and it's the best outcome. But to answer your question, I would say probably the most effective, if you had to have a therapy that wasn't going to be poison, and you could only have one, I would do intravenous vitamin C, high dose vitamin C.
And this goes also for prevention?
Yeah, you don't need as high. You don't need as high dose, but you could do, for example, a dose for somebody with active cancer would be anywhere from 50 to 150 grams, depending on the person, 3 times a week. So that's high dose.
Are there secondary effects to these doses of vitamin C?
The only effects are not directly from vitamin C, but from the fact that because there's so much vitamin C in the fluid, in the blood, that it can make you dehydrated and you get thirsty, and sometimes you can get aches and pains. But we can fix that by just adding more water, having you drink water, and keep you hydrated. So it's not really a poison, but it can make you uncomfortable in that regard. But for prevention, I would say 25 grams once a week. If you had a normal life, and you were relatively healthy, because that 25 grams is going to clean up. We know that vitamin C is an antioxidant, and that means it neutralizes what are called free radicals, and free radicals are what biochemically damage cells. So if you're continually cleaning that up, you're going to kind of prevent this kind of thing from happening. So it's a good preventative strategy.
Okay, and talking about the myth of cancer, let's say, what do you think about this? Is it genetic or not?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Most doctors are looking for the genetic details about a tumor, and most patients are afraid, oh, my mother had cancer, my grandmother had cancer, so they're, okay. So the general sense is that there's a genetic component, but the truth is there's not. If you understand what we said before, that the mitochondria have to be damaged, and that once they get damaged, the cell has to change the way it functions to survive. So the genetic expression, that means certain genes are turned on and certain genes are turned off. So now that you have your cells the genetics are expressing different ones, but they're not the cause, they're the consequence. And the way we know this is they've taken cancer cells and a healthy cell, and they take the DNA out of the cancer cell and they put it into a healthy cell. It becomes healthy. The DNA didn't cause it. Then they take healthy DNA and they put it into the cell that has cancer, and it becomes cancer. So even though the DNA was normal. So they call these hybrid experiments, and these are being done in universities around the world. And so we now know that cancer is, if you understand that, then you understand cancer is a metabolic disease, not a genetic disease. So this is very, very important. There are some conditions like the BRCA gene and stuff like that, which can, but they're rare, very rare. And so they're very rare, and still, even if you have it, you don't have to have your organs removed. You can, again, lead a healthy life, do different things.
Yeah, this was the next question. What do you advise people? Because there are a lot of well-known public persons that they do this surgery preventive, let's say, and it's like a model for the others. So that
Sure.
What advice would you give?
Well, my general advice for anybody considering surgery for anything is to research it. And the reason I say that, research it thoroughly. And that's because whenever you get any kind of surgery, it's irreversible. It's a treatment that's irreversible. So, and so especially in cancer. So before you do it, you have to do your research. So I think the high-profile people that did it, unfortunately, didn't do all the research. And if you do all the research, you'll find out that the surgery doesn't help. Because, by the way, the most famous person that we know of is Angelina Jolie, and she had many organs removed because she had the BRCA gene, the BRCA gene. But the problem is this, is that that gene is not specific for breast or ovaries, it's for cancer in general. So now, even though she's had certain parts of her body removed, her colon can get cancer. I mean, due to this genetic thing. So you can't remove everything, so that's why it doesn't really work. So now what she has to do to prevent her pancreas and her colon from getting cancer, she's got to do the same thing she would have had to do if she didn't get the surgeries, and that is lead a healthy life, and do preventative things, you know.
What about, what is your opinion about vaccination also with a preventive goal, let's say, like HPV, and what is your opinion on this?
Well, it's really the only vaccination. Actually, there are two viruses that are related to cancer that we have vaccines: hepatitis B vaccine and the HPV vaccine. There's not a clear causal relationship between HPV and cervical cancer. It's an association. There is it's pretty clear that hepatitis B can cause liver cancer. But not everybody that gets hepatitis B gets liver cancer. Not everybody that gets human papillomavirus gets cervical cancer. Not everybody that gets Epstein-Barr virus gets nasopharyngeal cancer or gets Burkitt's lymphoma. So none of these are, just like that BRCA gene, are not guaranteed that you're going to get it. You still have to if you do the things that prevent your mitochondria from getting destroyed, you can't get cancer, because remember, that's what cancer is. Cancer is not something else. So, but anyway, so the vaccines are again, they don't, the other thing about vaccines, they don't, first of all, you could still get liver cancer that's not related to hepatitis B. You could get it from eating stuff, being exposed to carbon tetrachloride, or, you know, there's many, you know, in Thailand, liver cancer is the #1 cancer in the world, and it's because they eat a certain fish that has a liver fluke in it, and this liver fluke gets in and causes the cancer. So what I'm saying is, and then HPV, here's the other thing about vaccines. What we're finding, and there was a recent outbreak, and there's been several, I think in the US, in Harvard, where there was an outbreak of mumps, and they found out that all the people that got it had gotten the vaccine. So what we're finding now, these vaccines not only can be harmful for a variety of reasons that we won't get into, but they also don't necessarily prevent the disease that they're supposed to prevent. So, you know, and the mumps, by the way, if you're pretty healthy, if you stay healthy, and the mumps will be mild. If you're really healthy, measles will be mild. You know, all of these conditions will be mild. In fact, if you test the general population and talk to them, you'll find out that almost everybody has antibodies for mumps, measles, and they may never have known they had it. You know, there are people that are positive for hepatitis B. They never really got sick, but they got exposed somehow. So the best way to immunize yourself is to be healthy and let your immune system do it. Because if your immune system can do it, it's just like a muscle. Once you train your muscles, you're strong, right? And once you train your immune system by challenging it with different conditions, it becomes strong. And you want a strong immune system. So there are many, many reasons that I would avoid vaccines.
And what about mammography done also preventive, like once a year, as is in general known?
Right.
For women after 40.
Yeah, exactly. And they call it preventative, but it's not. It's really early detection. So the idea is, if we can detect it early, we can help it. But the data don't show that. The data don't show that if you get it early. Because here's one of the problems, here's one of the tricks of statistics. In many studies, they call surviving 5 years a cure. So you die the next day, you still go in the cure column. So, if the average person that gets a particular cancer dies in 5 years, if we can find it 2 years earlier, then by 5 years they will not have died. They would die at 7 years. So that it looks like the statistics make it look good. Because when we look at the other data that's been published in the oncology journals, we know that people with stage 4 cancer worldwide have a 2.1% chance of being alive at 5 years if they go to the conventional approach, which is not a very good statistic. So.
And if they choose also alternative medicine or integrative to combine all the benefits from conventional with alternative therapies, which is then the statistics?
Well, then there's several clinics that are sharing their research, collecting their data together, and they're finding with the same kind of person, stage 4 cancer, they're looking at around 61% alive at 5 years. Now, that's significant, but you got to remember, we're only talking about stage 4 where it's really far advanced, and some of these people, there's a different kind of stage 4. Stage 4 just means that the cancer is in another organ. So if you have a breast tumor, and it just goes through the skin is another organ, so that's stage 4. Well, that's very different than the colon cancer, who had liver, lungs, and brain. That's stage 4 too. So you almost can't, they shouldn't be the same category. But so you can be stage 4 and be healthy and just have a mild thing, or be very, very sick. But anyway, in general, the stage 4 people are 61%. And that is, really, the reason is because the therapies, while you're trying to eliminate the cancer, you're supporting the body to be healthy. That's the main difference, because with the other approach, you're just going to war against the cancer. And if the body gets damaged, oh well, So that's why the people die from the treatment effects. So that's why this works better. And I think that data, that 61%, is even low, because not all of those centers do all the things necessary to make the person healthy. But it's definitely much better than 2.1%.
And another myth about using hormones for women, like estriol. I know from the training that you said there are 3 types of estrogen. So if you can talk about this.
Yeah, breast cancer and ovarian cancer and prostate cancer and uterine cancer, cancers that are related to sexual organs are responsive to hormones. And so, in fact, with breast cancer, when they diagnose it and they biopsy it, they look at it to see if there are estrogen receptors or progesterone receptors or this other kind of receptor, like epidermal growth factor, as it's called. It's a HER2 receptor. So they look at these kind of receptors, but the hormones, and so they find out, so basically what they have found is that if it's estrogen receptor positive, that means the estrogen is going to make it grow. And that's true. But it turns out that the body makes 3 different kinds of estrogens. Estrone, estradiol, and estriol. And also that estrogen receptors are of 2 types. There's the alpha and the beta. And they have different results. If the alpha is stimulated, it causes tumor growth and tissue growth and things like that. if the beta is stimulated, it actually slows it down, and because of its proximity to the alpha, if there's something bound on the beta, it's going to block the alpha so that other estradiol can't get there. So the estrogens that produce tumor growth are estrone, estradiol. Estriol, which is predominant during pregnancy, is a weaker in its estrogenic effects, but it stimulates, it binds to the beta receptor and therefore decreases, is protective. It decreases the tumor growth and it protects against the other one from stimulating it. So it's doing what? It's doing exactly what tamoxifen is supposed to do, except that tamoxifen, if you take it for 5 years or more, you have a very high risk of getting uterine cancer. So it's basically a natural way, and you cannot get estriol from a retail pharmacy, because remember, anything you get from a retail pharmacy has been patented, and if it's been patented, that means it's been altered not to be natural anymore, because you cannot patent a natural substance. So if you get if they were to make an estriol, it wouldn't be the same, and then we don't know really what the effect would be. So there are ways of getting what are called plant-derived bioidentical hormones. So if you can get a plant-derived bioidentical estriol, then you're going to be real successful in blocking that hormone receptor. The other thing you can use is soy products. And the reason if you look at most indigenous cultures that use soy products, they usually eat them in a fermented way. And it's not because it works better, but it's because if the soy is unfermented, you can get gastrointestinal upset. But not always. For example, tofu is not fermented, but Japanese eat it a lot. I eat it a lot, and I don't get. You'd have to eat a lot. Most of the upset people get from unfermented foods is basically from the American business marketing perspective. What America, and now the whole world, does business-wise, if they find a product that's good, they're going to find 100,000 ways to use it. So we have soy milk, we have soy nuts, we have soy cheese, we have soy pancakes, we have, all these things they're processed soy, and they're not fermented, and who knows what's happening during the processing part. So when we're talking about soy products, we have to realize that that's not the Japanese who don't get breast cancer before they started eating bad food, but didn't get breast cancer, didn't get prostate cancer, and lived 10 years longer than everybody else. They were not eating all these weird soy things. They were eating tofu, miso soup, which is fermented, tempeh, natto, and then we all know you go into the Japanese restaurant, you get edamame or the soybeans, So they eat these beans, they eat the soy in natural ways, and there's not a problem.
Natural and organic, and to pay attention to not be modified.
Soy is probably the most genetically modified food on the planet. Soy and corn. So that's the problem, finding that's not genetically modified.
You also mentioned something very interesting, that with the radio and chemo you cannot stop spreading the cancer because the stem cells, they are, can you?
Sure. What's pretty clear now by all the masters of oncology now in all the university centers and research centers, is they pretty much understood that a very small percentage of cancer cells can metastasize or spread to another organ, about 1% or less. And it's the cells that spread are what are called cancer stem cells. The mature cancer cells don't spread. So, and when you're using chemo and radiation, you're really just killing the mature cancer cells. So it's like getting a haircut, but you haven't changed anything. the hair will grow back because you still have the hair roots. And those roots are the cancer stem cells. And it turns out that cancer stem cells are not affected by the radiation and chemo. So, but what is more is that we know that chemo actually sets in motion the WNT proteins, which actually encourage metastasis. We know that radiation causes cancer. So both of these things actually increase cancer, and they increase inflammation. And inflammation is the thing that draws stem cells. So if you've got stem cells, if you've got cancer stem cells here, and you're inflamed, they're gonna be drawn to that. So the most important way to prevent metastasis and even to prevent cancer in the first place is to live a life that keeps you at a very low inflammatory state. So, because chronic inflammation underlies not only cancer but heart disease and Alzheimer's and arthritis and gastritis and you name it, colitis, migraine. It's all chronic inflammation. So, in the way you can avoid or decrease chronic inflammation is by eating foods that won't cause inflammation, making sure that you get enough sleep, hormones are balanced, all the things that you would do that lead a healthy life means you're leading a life that results in a low inflammatory state. Inflammation, remember, is how the body heals. So the body's only going to have to be healing extra if I'm doing bad things to it, right? If I'm hurting it. Like the guy that runs all the time, the marathoner, and he winds up getting bad knees. You gotta slow down. What are you gonna say? Okay, keep running and then I'll give you a drug. You gotta slow down. You gotta not run so much. Okay, so it's just we have to understand that we have our lifestyle. When I talk to people, I ask them, "Can I see your list of things to do today?" Everybody's got a to-do list, and I look at it and I never see health on there. Now, health should be number one, but it's not there at all. Here's the thing: if you don't make it number one, it will find its way there, and you're going to find yourself sitting in a clinic or a hospital all day, every day, because you didn't put it number one, and now it is number one. So you put it number one, it'll remain that. Otherwise, you're in trouble. So that's what we're talking about. And that's what we would like to do. We would like to teach people how not to get cancer, because it's interesting. Whatever it is that you need to do to be healed, you need to do that same thing to stay healthy. So once you're healed, it's not like you can say, okay, now that I'm better, can I start smoking again? No. Oh, my knees are better. I'm going to go do a marathon every weekend. Okay. I'll see you back here in a few weeks. So we have to realize that you can't just now go back and do it. And that's the hardest part, because most problems that people have with their body is due to lifestyle.
Can you mention a few main things about lifestyle that are very important to keep in our mind?
Yeah, the main thing, probably, they're all equally important, but eating, sleep, exercise, and stress, if I had to come up with the 4 things. So eating, we need to eat foods that were designed for us. Every species is attracted to and eats the food for which they were designed. Birds look for insects, or if they're eagles, they'll look for mice. They were designed for that. Birds don't fly around eating broccoli. They're not attracted to it. But they have the beak, they're designed for it. So, and each animal knows what to eat because of instinct. Our problem is we lose our instinct and we become, we follow our cultures. So wherever if you're in Australia, you have one culture. If you're in Egypt, you have another culture. So if you're in China, you have another culture. And each culture eats according to their culture. And the culture is, in fact, I don't, very, very rare that we've ever found cultures that eat the way humans were designed. So humans are actually what are called primates, like gorillas and chimps and that. And you get a look at what they eat, you know, and you can, it's clear. So if you eat that food and you also look around the world and you see, look at all the animals everywhere you go, and you never find a barbecue pit in the lion den. They don't barbecue, and they don't use microwaves, and they don't have ovens, you know, so they're not cooking their food. They're actually eating just what nature gave them. So now, nobody can be perfect. So you don't do this 100% of the time, because nobody will. So you say, okay, I'm going to do this 70% of the time. I'm going to eat as healthy as I can, and 30% I'm going to indulge a little bit and have some fun, and that's fine, you know. But so it's eating, and then also the amount you eat, the frequency. We need to eat much, much less. We know if you cut down the caloric intake on any animal by 50%, you increase their lifespan by 30%. That's pretty significant. And that's all species. So eating less.
How many meals per day do you eat?
At the most 2.
2 most.
Yeah. You know, 1.5 to 2 meals would be fine. We find people get extremely healthy if they're doing one meal a day. But it's really hard to do. It's hard to do. So, but there are ways around that you can learn to make yourself vegetable juices and smoothies and things like that, and munch on healthy things like nuts. You know, things that are healthy. That don't, because by the way, food that's not cooked and not of animal origin does not cause an inflammatory reaction. Okay, so we know that because we can measure biomarkers in the blood like CRP and galactin-3 and things like that. But anyway, so diet, and then the amount, making sure your bowels are clean. There's different ways of doing that. Getting enough sleep, going to bed early.
What means early? What means early?
Early means ideally 7 or 8. Most people aren't going to do that, so let's say 9. The earlier you go to bed, the more your sleep is able to repair your body from the day. The later you go to bed, even if you get the same amount of time, like if you go to bed at 11 and you sleep till 7, that's 8 hours, but it's not the same. You didn't repair as much. So you'll feel okay, you know, and you'll say, I'm fine, but you don't realize that over time you're not repairing your body. So the earlier, the better, with sleep, and also enough sleep, and then exercise, because the exercise, moving the muscles. If we were living a natural life, we would get up and we would have to do things, and we would be moving around, and we'd be walking and climbing and stuff like that. But with our modern lifestyle, we don't do much motion, so we had to invent something called exercise. You know, we have to go and but you have to. So that's if you work on a farm, you don't need to exercise because your life is exercise.
Yeah.
But here, you know, so we need to, and the reason we need to do it is because your muscles are what generate the process of metabolism. They stimulate hormones. They do so many different things. I mean, can you imagine if you had no arms and no legs? If you were just a torso? You know, there would be you'd be really sick. You'd wind up being, someone would have to roll you around. You wouldn't, you know. They're not just for convenience and tools, but they also generate things. They generate the utilization of fuel. They stimulate hormones. They produce cytokines. They do all sorts of things. So when you don't muscle, and one of the big important things is muscles are what help drain the waste from tissues, because the tissues are drained by the veins and the lymph. The veins and the lymph don't have any pump, like the arteries have a heart. There's no pump. So the pump for them is the muscles. So if you're not moving your muscles and contracting it, then all of the waste products that you're producing are just sitting there. You know, and that accumulation of waste is going to damage mitochondria, and result in cancer. So anyway, and then the other thing is stress. And the way with stress is you have to learn, one thing you want to make sure is that you have as healthy relationships as possible, you know? It's very difficult to do, but you got to work on it. You got to work on having healthy relationships, being honest. You know, when you're not honest and you've got these problems, it causes stress. Because life has enough stress, you don't need to make more. But learn how to meditate, which means you learn how to turn the mind off. Okay? Because you can't decide what you're going to think. Your thoughts come to you just like your heart beats. It's just something that's happening. So what you can do to get control of it is to just develop, and there are many meditation techniques. And if you're a strict Muslim or strict Christian, a strict Buddhist, I mean, whatever religion you are, by meditating doesn't mean you're violating a religious belief. Because Muhammad meditated, Jesus meditated. I mean, the top people of the religions, meditation's a necessary thing. It's part of, you know, you can think of meditation as, you know, you can think of prayer as asking, and meditation as listening. Right? So maybe we need to listen a little bit more, and that's all meditation is listening, turning the mind off. But that way you learn to de-stress. There are other ways to de-stress. Exercise is de-stress. You know, anyway, getting good sleep is de-stress.
What about emotional healing? Which is the importance of it in preventing and curing cancer?
Yeah, emotional healing, again, is pretty much what we're talking about with stress. What we don't realize is the emotional damage that happens to us through our lives. Things happen. I mean, you know, something like, you know, you be 7 years old and you see somebody hit the dog, a car hit. You might not realize how deeply that affected you. The thing about emotions, or you had a physical accident, but we don't realize that our emotions actually get a physical response. Like the myofascia, the myofascia that covers the muscles move, you know, and we might have, you know, I saw that, and then, you know, we don't realize it, so we got all these locks in there. There's a practice called myofascial release, which we have a really good practitioner, and what he does is he's very mild, you don't even know what's happening, but he helps someone like release something and they start crying or laughing because there was an emotion stuck in there. Yeah. So there's that. So that, you know, that's very, and there are different disciplines of neural reprogramming that are excellent, that help people actively and go after healing these emotions. Because the thing is, if you've got a really bad emotional thing with your mother, and it's affecting and you come and you cleanse and you do really good and all that stuff, and you haven't healed that, you're going to wind up back in the same condition, because that's going to control you. Because I always see that. I see people, they do great in our environment, and then they go back home and they're right back there. So you have got to deal with the emotions.
And the importance of the family to change in the entire family the lifestyle and together with the
yeah. Because, you know, you can't say that the cancer happened to just the person. You know, the spouse, it changed their life. It changed the parents' lives. It changes everybody's life. Everybody's affected by it. And so it really is a family affair. So healing has got to be on a family level. And if your family is not, if you go through some really significant changes in order to heal, but your family hasn't, then your family will become toxic for you. You know, it's kind of like, and it's easy to do this. Suppose I go to a place and I learn to quit smoking, and now I come home and everybody's smoking. You know, it's going to be really difficult. And it's the same kind of thing with diet and lifestyle. It's easier if you're just married, and so it's just you and a spouse, you know. But if you've got a big family, then it gets really hard, you know. So It's not easy. It's not easy. But the more that the family's involved, the more that you can have a willingness to make these changes. And what we do is we think the most important thing that we do is educate people.
What about education kids? Educating kids? Because we hear is if you can give us from your experience some tips about it, about it's this environment that all fast food is all over and they want to go there to socialize with their friends, and this you cannot stop it. And you cannot create a competition because of the economical sustainability of such a business, like a raw food bar for kids in school and high school. They don't go there, and the business cannot sustain itself. So then, which is your advice? How to do?
Well, it's really hard. It depends on the family, and it depends on the parents' relationship with their children. But what I did, I can only tell you what I did with my children, is I educated them so much so that they didn't want to eat certain foods, like they didn't want to eat meat or other things that were really bad. So when they would go with their friends, they would order the same kind of food but minus meat and all that, so they could still socialize and all that sort of thing. But my kids did that because I showed them videos and I read to them and I had them read and I had them understand that I let them watch videos of what they do in the slaughterhouses, and so they, to them there was no question, but they still wanted to socialize. So, but not everybody has that kind of relationship. My kids they're grown now and they're really happy that they don't. They're very, very healthy and they eat really good. But it's, I don't know, because unfortunately a lot of people are, because of the society now, the parents are working so much and the kids are being brought up by computers and friends and the control that you have with your kids. So the best thing that I think you can do as a parent, mother or father, is to become a role model. Eat that way, live that way. Because if you're doing it, because no matter what our kids think, they want to be like mama or dad or papa. And we all wind up being like our parents, even. So the more you can so the best thing you can do for your kids is work on yourself. You go to bed early, you eat right, you do these things, and then they're going to want to do that. If the family does that as a whole, then they're going to want to do it, and they won't want to do it as much. Like if, but this is the challenge, especially 17 now. It's it's very.
Okay. And another question: you have because you have this healing center, but also you work for other centers in simply detox centers. Like, I was curious how this helps. How does it help for a healthy person to go there once or twice a year to simply detoxify? And it is working, or is just a snobbish stuff?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. If you understand that the diseases result as a consequence of the accumulation of toxins. We look at aging. We look at any disease as it's an accumulation of toxins and waste products and stuff like that. Once they start to accumulate, then the organ can't function as good. So if you've got to clean it out. Now, a very easy way to understand this is if you had a car and you didn't change the oil, within a couple of years, your car wouldn't drive very well, clearly. You got to change the oil. We don't think twice about that when it comes to machines. We don't realize here we have an incredible machine. We've got to change the oil. We've got to give it a tune-up. We've got to rotate the tires. We've got to do these things. We've got to give it a chance. So if you have a regular period every year, 2 to 3 to 4 times is ideal. Once every season, clean out. Spend a week, do a good detox, clean out. The waste won't accumulate you're going to find that you're not getting diabetes, your blood pressure is normal, you're not going to develop these things. So when you get to be 60 and 70, you won't be weak and sick and taking medication. You won't even need to go to the doctor because you'll be cleaning out. So it's very, very important. It's maintenance. You do it for machines, so why wouldn't you do it for yourself,
Oh, thank you very much. I know that you are coming back in Romania in April or
Yes.
May. Yeah, okay. We are very lucky.
Yeah, I love it here. I just didn't get a chance to see much because it's freezing.
Yeah. But you got the chance to learn to increase our appetite for what you are doing. And I would like to tell to our audience how they can reach you if they want to get in touch with you. How can they reach you?
Well, I have a center in the U.S. in Arizona. It's called an Oasis of Healing, and then I work at a center in Thailand called the Life Co. To really get in touch with me, probably the best way, and both of them have websites, etc. But the best way would be to get in touch with me through TravelMed with Denise Apopa, who knows us quite well, and she can, not only put you in touch, but facilitate everything, especially if someone has a cancer or their relative has a cancer, she can help arrange that we have the right documents, and then we can do a Skype call, or there's lots of things that we can do, and then we're hoping to work with doctors here in Romania so that eventually you wouldn't have to travel to get this kind of treatment again.
Great. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm looking forward for you to come back